Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Ghosty Podcast. I'm your host, Ariel Willow, a clairvoyant since childhood, paranormal investigator, and an occult practitioner. Before we jump in, I want to remind you that everyone has different views on things, and that's okay. I don't ask you to believe what I do, I just want to share what I've found in my personal path with others. For those who are interested in booking a private session with me, check out my website, www.arielwillow.com. I restock my shop every Saturday. Today's topic is another question from the Discord channel for the podcast questions, so let's go through it. The question is, in short, from what I've gathered over time about the afterlife journey, is that our souls come into physical forms to experience a life and gain experience on a soul level. Or sometimes we even become spirit guides to others along the way if we so choose, or return to source. But assuming we don't decide to return to source, would that cycle of living and gaining experience continue forever? Is there any quote-unquote completion or ultimate goal of this soul journey as we keep living lives, or is it forever ongoing? Or are we simply the universe always experiencing itself until we ultimately decide to go back to source? This is a great question, and ultimately the short answer is yes, it can continue for as long as we choose, and ultimately we are source living out physical lives to gain more knowledge. When people ask me what the purpose of existence is, my answer is a very boring one, because all it really is just knowledge, gathering knowledge, understanding things, living out different existences to gather as much information as we can, because knowledge ultimately is power. But what I think is really beautiful is that I personally don't see source energy as a sentient thing. I believe that we are all source, but also source is us. And ultimately, it doesn't have a personality or a consciousness, like a sentient being would. But since ultimately what it is source gathering knowledge, really what we're doing is gathering knowledge about ourselves, because we are source and source is us. But what I really find beautiful is that throughout our lives, really what we do throughout our human existences, as well as other existences, is we learn more about ourselves every day, every year, every month that goes by. And by doing that, we're actually learning about ourselves, but not only learning about ourselves. The more we know about ourselves, the more we understand about source. It's just a really beautiful Ouroboros effect that takes place with all of that. There are so many times within our lives that I think we feel lost, or we feel like we're not on the right track, or we're, going off into some sort of train of existence that we weren't supposed to. We're just absolutely lost in the void. But what's really cool is that those are always opportunities for us to learn more about ourselves, and in turn, learn more about source. You will always come back to yourself every single time. But the self that you come back to won't always be the self that you recognize. I want to go through a metaphor because I know that metaphors help me understand topics and subjects, but also help others understand them as well. So let's go through a little metaphor that came to my mind with this. So let's imagine that you're walking along this path. Okay, you're on this hike and it's this one trail. Okay, I want you to imagine this trail in your head. You're on this trail, you can see a fair ways ahead of you, but not the complete trail at all. But there's a rabbit trail to your right, and you start walking down it, and it seems really interesting and super exciting, and you're like, wow, I'm gonna find out this new thing that's on this trail that I wouldn't have found out on the other trail. And let's say that the main trail that you were on is what is considered the trail of self. It's the trail that holds the baseline understanding of yourself and the baseline of who you are as a person. But on this rabbit trail that you're going on, that you decided to take, you learn a lot along the way. But ultimately, you come back to this trail, and there becomes a fork in this rabbit trail with another trail. And the trail seems kind of familiar, but it's different. And as you merge back into this other trail, you realize that it's just further along the trail of self, the original trail that you were on, but was just a different way of going back to it. So, what I'm trying to say is that as we go through our lives, you will always have times when you decide to take a fork in the road and you are worried or maybe excited about taking that trail because you don't know where it leads. But at the same time, you just feel this pull to take you that way. And I think a lot of times we can get worried that we're going to lose ourselves in the process. We're going to lose who we are. We're going to lose our identity. And we're going to lose this sense of self that we had on that original trail. But ultimately, at the end of the trail, that bunny trail that you decided to take, you always come back to yourself, but at a further ahead spot than where you were. Ultimately, you're still making progress and you're still attached to yourself. It's just understanding that you're further along in your path, having taken another path, than maybe having taken the path that you knew what to expect with. I want you to think about a time in your life where you decided to take a chance on something that maybe you never planned on taking a chance on, or maybe you wanted to take a chance on, but you were worried about the outcome with. And I want you to contemplate where that led you, because I imagine that what you're going to find is that although during some time in that path, you maybe felt lost and disconnected from yourself, you found yourself again at the end, and not just the same way that you were before. It was a more evolved part of you. It was a more evolved version of you, and a version of you that helped understand yourself a little bit better. So now I want to go to a wider scope metaphor. Okay, are you ready? All right, let's go back to the path of self. And let's say that rather than the path of self being for you, let's say that the path of self is the universe or source energy. Now I want you to imagine there's hundreds of little rabbit trails trailing off of that original trail, which we can consider source energy. And I want you to look at it as each trail being a different part of source that has incarnated into a physical incarnation. All we really are in our existence, whether that is as a star being or as a human incarnate or a fairy or, whatever incarnation you have, all you are is just a path off of source that ultimately finds itself again. You can take hundreds of different paths from source. You can take hundreds of different pathways from your rabbit trail. You can get what feels like so far from source that you feel absolutely disconnected from itself entirely. But ultimately, you're going to find yourself again, and you're going to return to source at some point. And when you do, you will have all of the knowledge that you've gained from that rabbit trail, because ultimately, all trails go to the same place, but they might take us different routes to get there. So yes, ultimately our purpose of living and our purpose of incarnating is not just gathering knowledge. And gathering knowledge can be a kind of umbrella explanation that we have, and that's the one that I use a lot. I'm just like, we're just gathering knowledge. That's all we're doing. But ultimately, I think it's a lot more exciting and a lot more easy to understand when we look at it as we're not just gathering knowledge. We're gathering knowledge about ourselves. And that is a beautiful, beautiful thought. And some days when I think about that, I'm just like, oh, God, it's so boring. Can't we have a really exciting timeline story or storyline that we can go through that has excitement? But the truth is that is exciting. That is exciting, because every single experience that we have in our lives and every single moment that we have in our lives that we have and experience and, learn from is just us learning about source and learning about ourselves. And I just think that's really, really beautiful. So I wanted to share that. I hope that answers your question. Thank you so much for your question. And I hope this brought you some clarity that you were looking for. If you have a question for the podcast that you would like me to answer, you can go ahead and email me at www.arielwillow.com using the contact form on the website, or you can leave a question in the Ghost Tea Podcast Questions channel on the Discord. You can find the link to that Discord, which is just Strange Ones Discord, on my link tree through my bios in my social media. I've been trying to figure out the voice memo questions, and for whatever reason, I just can't figure out how to import them to have them as part of the podcast. So what I might end up doing is just telling you guys what the questions were and then answering them rather than having the audio in the episode. So I don't know. I'm technologically like stunted with this. So I'm trying to figure it out. I can't figure out how I got it to work last time. So we're still figuring it out. But ultimately, I hope you guys are having a wonderful week, and I hope that it's treating you well. And I am excited to talk to you again sometime soon. So as always, stay safe, stay curious, and keep learning. All right, have a great one.